The courtroom was silent, the tension so thick it felt as though the air had been sucked out of the room. 10-year-old Lily sat at the witness table, clutching her stuffed animal tightly, her wide blue eyes darting nervously between the judge and her parents. When her mother's voice broke the silence with a trembling, "Lily, go to your father," the room seemed to hold its breath. But it was Lily's next words, spoken with a mix of fear and defiance, that left everyone frozen in shock. "I don't want to live with him." The courtroom buzzed with quiet murmurs as people shuffled into their seats, each person eager to witness the high-stakes custody battle that had become the talk of the small town. Emma Carter sat at the plaintiff's table, her hands tightly clasped together, her knuckles pale from tension. She was a young woman in her early 30s, with tired eyes that betrayed the sleepless nights she had spent worrying about this day. Beside her sat her lawyer, flipping through a thick file of documents. On the other side of the room sat her ex-husband, Thomas Brown. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man with an air of confidence that felt almost out of place in such a somber setting. His lawyer whispered something to him, and he gave a slight nod, his sharp blue eyes briefly flicking toward Emma before looking away. Between them, their 10-year-old daughter, Lily, sat silently at a small table reserved for witnesses. Her feet dangled just above the floor, and her small hands gripped the edges of her chair. She was a slender girl with big, expressive blue eyes that darted nervously around the room. Her pale blonde hair was neatly brushed, but there was an unmistakable tension in her posture. She looked as though she wanted to disappear into the floor. Judge Robert Miller entered the room, and the quiet chatter immediately ceased. He was a middle-aged man with silver-streaked hair and a calm but authoritative demeanor. As he took his seat, he glanced over the courtroom, his sharp gaze assessing everyone present. "This court is now in session," the bailiff announced. Case number 2345, Carter v. Brown, custody hearing for Lily Brown. Judge Miller adjusted his glasses and spoke, his voice steady but firm. "We are here today to determine the custody arrangement for Lily Brown. I understand this is a deeply personal and emotional matter for both parties, but I ask that everyone remains respectful as we proceed." The lawyers began their opening statements. Emma's attorney, a meticulous woman named Rachel Green, argued that Lily felt safer and more comfortable with her mother and presented evidence of Thomas's controlling behavior during the marriage. Thomas's lawyer countered, portraying Thomas as a strict but loving father who wanted what was best for his daughter. The arguments were compelling on both sides, but the weight of the decision clearly hung on Lily's perspective. When it was time for Lily to speak, the room seemed to hold its breath. Judge Miller leaned forward slightly, his expression softening as he addressed her. "Lily," he said gently, "this must be very difficult for you, and I want you to know that you're not in trouble here. We're just trying to understand what you want and how you feel. Take your time, and speak honestly." Lily hesitated, her eyes flicking between her parents. Her mother gave her a small, reassuring smile, while her father sat stiffly, his hands folded on the table in front of him. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity before Emma, unable to bear it any longer, leaned slightly forward and spoke. "Lily, go to your father," she said softly but firmly, motioning toward Thomas. "It's okay." Lily's entire body stiffened. Her eyes filled with tears, and she shook her head. Then, with trembling hands, she gripped the microphone in front of her and spoke in a voice that, while small, carried a weight that silenced the entire room. "I don't want to live with him." The words hung in the air, echoing through the silent courtroom. Thomas's jaw clenched, his face turning red as he opened his mouth to protest, but Judge Miller raised a hand, stopping him before he could speak. "Lily," the judge said gently, "can you tell me why you feel this way? It's important for us to understand." Lily glanced at her mother, then back at the judge. She hesitated, her small voice trembling as she continued. "He yells at me, a lot. And he doesn't want me to see Mom. He says it's better for me, but I don't want that. I don't feel happy there." The room remained utterly still. Judge Miller's expression turned thoughtful, and he made a few notes on the paper in front of him. For a moment, even Thomas seemed at a loss for words, his usual confident demeanor replaced with uncertainty. "We'll take a recess," Judge Miller finally announced, striking his gavel. "I'll need time to review this further." As the courtroom began to clear, Emma reached out and gently placed her hand on Lily's shoulder. "You did so well," she whispered, her voice filled with both pride and sadness. Lily looked up at her mother, her big blue eyes still brimming with tears. "I just want to stay with you," she said softly. Emma hugged her daughter tightly, her heart aching but hopeful. Whatever the outcome, she knew she would fight with everything she had to keep Lily safe. The courtroom was quiet, its usual hum of whispers and shuffled papers muted as people processed what had just happened. Lily's words, so simple yet so heavy, seemed to echo in everyone's minds. Emma sat beside her lawyer, her heart pounding as she held her daughter's hand under the table. Across the room, Thomas was visibly tense, his jaw clenched and his fists balled on the table in front of him. Judge Miller remained seated, scribbling notes on the pad before him. His expression was calm, but his sharp eyes revealed the gravity of what had just transpired. After a few moments, he cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "Miss Green," he said, addressing Emma's attorney, "I believe we need a more comprehensive picture of this family dynamic before proceeding further. I want to hear from any social workers involved and review the family's past evaluations. We will take a recess to ensure all relevant information is presented. Reconvene in 1 hour." The sound of the gavel striking the block was sharp and final. People began to rise from their seats, the quiet murmurs returning as they filed out of the courtroom. Emma gathered her things, helping Lily to her feet. The girl looked pale and drained, her small frame slouched as if the weight of her words had taken a toll on her. As they left the courtroom, Thomas stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Emma," he called out, his voice low but harsh. "You're poisoning her against me." Emma froze, turning to face him. Her lawyer stepped between them, her voice calm but firm. "Mr. Brown, now is not the time or place. If you have concerns, you can voice them during the appropriate proceedings." Thomas glared at her, then at Emma. "This isn't over," he muttered before walking out of the courtroom with his lawyer. Emma tightened her grip on Lily's hand and led her to a quiet corner outside the courtroom. She knelt down to meet her daughter's eyes. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" she asked softly. Lily nodded hesitantly, her eyes still watery. I don't want to make him angry." Emma's chest tightened. "You didn't do anything wrong, Lily," she said gently. "You were brave, and you told the truth. That's all anyone can ask of you." Lily hesitated, then leaned into her mother's arms, burying her face in her shoulder. Emma stroked her hair, silently vowing to do everything in her power to protect her daughter. The hour passed slowly. Emma's lawyer, Rachel, used the time to gather additional evidence and prepare for what she suspected would be a heated continuation of the hearing. Emma sat with Lily in a quiet waiting area, offering her daughter small reassurances and distractions to keep her calm. When they returned to the courtroom, the atmosphere was heavier than before. Thomas sat at his table, his lawyer whispering something urgently in his ear. He looked agitated, his usual confidence replaced by unease. Emma noticed the subtle shift in his demeanor and felt a flicker of hope. Judge Miller re-entered the room, and the chatter died down instantly. He took his seat and addressed the room. "I've reviewed the preliminary reports and requested additional testimony from relevant parties. Before we proceed, I'd like to hear from the social worker assigned to this case." A middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a professional demeanor stood and approached the stand. She introduced herself as Margaret Pierce, a social worker with over 20 years of experience handling custody cases. "Ms. Pierce," Judge Miller began, "you've conducted several home visits with both parents. Can you provide the court with your observations regarding Lily's living situation?" Margaret nodded, glancing at both Emma and Thomas before speaking. Over the course of my visits, I've observed distinct differences in the environments provided by each parent. In Mrs. Carter's home, Lily appears relaxed and comfortable. She engages freely, and there's a clear sense of stability and support. However, during my visits to Mr. Brown's home, I noticed Lily seemed withdrawn and hesitant. She avoided eye contact and responded to questions with short, nervous answers. Emma felt a mix of relief and sadness at Margaret's words. She knew Lily had been struggling, but hearing it confirmed by a professional was difficult to process. "Did you observe any behaviors from Mr. Brown that might explain Lily's hesitancy?" the judge asked. Margaret hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "While Mr. Brown did not exhibit overtly harmful behavior during my visits, he displayed a tendency to raise his voice frequently, even over minor issues. It was clear this affected Lily's comfort level." Thomas shifted in his seat, his face reddening. His lawyer whispered something to him, but he shook his head, clearly frustrated. Judge Miller nodded thoughtfully. "Thank you, Miss Pierce. Your observations are noted." As Margaret stepped down, the judge turned his attention back to the room. "This court takes the well-being of children very seriously. Based on what I've heard today, it's clear there are underlying concerns that need to be addressed. I will allow closing arguments tomorrow after further review of the case." The gavel struck again, signaling the end of the day's session. Emma exhaled deeply, feeling the smallest glimmer of hope that the truth was finally coming to light. She squeezed Lily's hand, whispering, "We're going to get through this, together." Lily looked up at her mother, her eyes still filled with uncertainty, but this time there was a flicker of trust. The next day, the courtroom was quieter than before, the weight of the previous day's revelations still hanging heavily in the air. Emma sat beside her lawyer, Rachel, who was busy organizing a series of documents and notes. Across the aisle, Thomas was seated with his own lawyer, visibly agitated as he whispered harshly, gesturing toward the judge's bench. His confidence from earlier seemed to have evaporated, replaced by frustration and defensiveness. Lily sat quietly at a small table near her mother, clutching a small stuffed animal Rachel had given her for comfort. Her wide eyes darted nervously around the room, but when her mother leaned down to whisper a few calming words, she nodded and took a deep breath. It was clear that the day's proceedings would be just as emotionally charged as the last. When Judge Miller entered and called the courtroom to order, he immediately addressed the room. "Before we proceed with closing arguments, I have reviewed additional evidence submitted by both parties. I will also be hearing further testimony from the involved parties today to ensure that the court has a complete understanding of this case." He turned his attention first to Thomas's lawyer. "Mr. Daniels, do you or your client wish to provide any additional information before we move forward?" Thomas's lawyer stood, his demeanor composed despite his client's visible irritation. "Your Honor, my client would like to clarify some of the concerns raised yesterday regarding his relationship with his daughter. He feels that certain claims have been exaggerated or taken out of context." The judge nodded. "Very well. Mr. Brown, you may take the stand." Thomas stood, adjusting his tie as he walked to the witness stand. Once seated, he looked out at the room, his gaze briefly landing on Emma before shifting to Judge Miller. He took a deep breath, clearly trying to control his emotions. "Mr. Brown," Judge Miller began, "it has been suggested that your behavior at home has contributed to Lily's discomfort. Would you like to respond to these claims?" Thomas leaned forward slightly, his hands gripping the edge of the stand. "Your Honor, I want to start by saying that I love my daughter. Everything I've done has been for her benefit. I believe in discipline and structure, and sometimes that means being firm. But I would never intentionally hurt Lily or make her feel unsafe." Rachel stood to cross-examine. "Mr. Brown, can you explain why multiple reports, including from the court-appointed social worker, describe Lily as withdrawn and nervous in your presence?" Thomas shifted uncomfortably. "Lily's a sensitive child. She tends to overthink things, and sometimes she misunderstands my intentions. I may raise my voice occasionally, but it's always because I want her to learn responsibility. Rachel raised an eyebrow. And would you say threatening to take her away forever, as evidenced by text messages submitted to the court, is also part of teaching responsibility? Thomas flushed, his jaw tightening. Those messages were sent in frustration. They don't reflect how I feel. I was angry because Emma wasn't following our agreements about visitation. Rachel paused, letting his words hang in the air for a moment before continuing. So, your solution to frustration was to threaten the stability of your daughter's life? Thomas opened his mouth to respond but hesitated, clearly struggling to find the right words. Judge Miller interjected. Thank you, Mr. Brown. You may step down. As Thomas returned to his seat, Emma noticed how his shoulders slumped slightly, his earlier bravado now replaced with uncertainty. She felt a flicker of relief but knew the case was far from over. Mrs. Carter, the judge said, turning his attention to Emma. Would you like to take the stand to provide additional testimony? Emma stood, smoothing her skirt as she walked to the witness stand. She glanced briefly at Lily, who offered her a small, nervous smile. Sitting down, Emma folded her hands neatly in her lap and waited for the judge's questions. Mrs. Carter, Judge Miller began, can you describe Lily's behavior and emotional state when she is in your care versus when she returns from visits with her father? Emma took a deep breath. Lily is usually happy and relaxed when she's at home with me. She talks about school, draws pictures, and plays with her friends. But after visits with her father, she often comes home quiet and withdrawn. She doesn't want to talk about what happened, and sometimes she has nightmares. The judge nodded. And do you believe her discomfort is the result of anything specific in Mr. Brown's parenting? Yes, Emma said firmly. Thomas has always been very controlling. He expects Lily to behave like an adult, even though she's just a child. If she makes a mistake or doesn't do something the way he wants, he raises his voice or punishes her. She's afraid of disappointing him. Rachel followed up with a question. Mrs. Carter, what would you say is your primary concern if joint custody were granted? Emma's voice trembled slightly but remained steady. I'm afraid Lily will lose her sense of safety and security. She needs a stable, nurturing environment where she feels loved and supported. I'm not saying Thomas doesn't love her, but his methods are hurting her emotionally. When Emma stepped down, she felt a wave of exhaustion but also a sense of accomplishment. She had spoken her truth and, more importantly, Lily's truth. Judge Miller looked thoughtful as he addressed the room. Thank you, Mrs. Carter. I've heard enough for today. I will review the evidence and testimony overnight, and we will reconvene tomorrow for closing arguments and a decision. The gavel struck once again, and the session was adjourned. As Emma gathered her things, she glanced at Lily, who reached out to hold her hand. You were really brave today, Mom, Lily said softly. Emma smiled, her eyes watering. I learned that from you, sweetheart. The following morning, the courtroom was filled with a tense and expectant silence as everyone awaited the final arguments. Emma sat beside her lawyer, Rachel, who was meticulously reviewing her notes one last time. Lily sat between them, clutching her small stuffed animal tightly. She looked tired but calm, her small fingers fidgeting with the soft fur of the toy. Across the room, Thomas sat with his lawyer, his face a mask of determination, though the tension in his posture betrayed his unease. Judge Miller entered the courtroom and took his seat, the usual authoritative presence radiating from him. Good morning, he said, addressing the room. We are here to proceed with the closing arguments for this custody case. I have carefully reviewed all the evidence, testimony, and reports submitted to the court, and I expect today to be focused, respectful, and productive. Let us begin. Thomas's lawyer, Mr. Daniels, rose first. He adjusted his tie and walked to the center of the courtroom, addressing the judge with practiced confidence. Your Honor, my client, Thomas Brown, has always acted in what he believes to be the best interest of his daughter, Lily. While there have been concerns raised about his parenting style, these concerns have been exaggerated and do not reflect the overall care and stability he provides. He paced slightly, his voice steady. Mr. Brown values discipline and responsibility, qualities that are essential for a child's development. While he may have expressed frustration in isolated moments, this does not make him unfit to parent. Granting joint custody would allow Lily to benefit from the influence of both parents, ensuring she grows up with a balanced perspective. Emma felt her stomach twist as Mr. Daniels continued, painting Thomas as a loving father who had been unfairly portrayed. She glanced at Rachel, who gave her a reassuring nod. They had prepared for this, and Emma knew their turn would come. When Mr. Daniels finished, Rachel stood, her heels clicking softly on the polished floor as she approached the judge's bench. "Your Honor," she began, her voice calm but firm, "we are not here to debate whether Mr. Brown loves his daughter. Love, however, is not enough when the methods used to express it cause emotional harm." She turned toward the courtroom, her gaze sweeping across the audience before landing back on the judge. "The evidence presented to this court, social worker reports, text messages, and, most importantly, Lily's own testimony, paints a clear picture. Lily is not comfortable in her father's care. She has expressed fear, anxiety, and a strong desire to remain with her mother. This is not a case of misunderstanding or exaggeration. This is a case of a child's well-being being at risk." Rachel gestured toward Emma. "Mrs. Carter has provided a safe, nurturing environment where Lily feels supported and loved. The stark contrast between her behavior at home and her behavior after visits with Mr. Brown cannot be ignored. Lily needs stability, not a divided custody arrangement that would only exacerbate her fears." Emma felt a surge of gratitude for Rachel's words, which so perfectly articulated everything she had been fighting for. She glanced at Lily, who was staring at Rachel with wide eyes, clearly understanding that her voice was being heard. Rachel continued, her tone softening slightly. "Your Honor, we are not here to punish Mr. Brown. We are here to protect Lily. And the best way to do that is to allow her to remain in the custody of her mother, with supervised visitation for Mr. Brown until he demonstrates an ability to provide a safe and supportive environment." When Rachel finished and returned to her seat, Emma whispered, "Thank you." Rachel gave her a small smile before focusing back on the judge, who was reviewing his notes. Judge Miller cleared his throat, drawing the courtroom's attention. "Thank you to both attorneys for your arguments. I will now take a brief recess to review everything one final time before delivering my decision. Court is adjourned until further notice." The sound of the gavel echoed through the room, and the tension seemed to lift slightly as people began to stir. Emma exhaled deeply, leaning down to whisper to Lily. "You're doing great, sweetheart. We're almost there." Lily nodded, her grip on her stuffed animal relaxing slightly. "I just want it to be over," she said quietly. "I know," Emma replied, brushing a strand of hair out of Lily's face. "And it will be. Soon." As they left the courtroom, Thomas shot Emma a look that was a mix of frustration and desperation. She avoided his gaze, focusing instead on getting Lily out of the room and into the fresh air. Whatever came next, Emma knew she had done everything she could to protect her daughter. Now, all she could do was wait. The courtroom was quieter than ever as everyone returned after the judge's brief recess. The weight of the moment was palpable. Emma sat at her table, holding Lily's hand tightly. She could feel the small tremors in her daughter's fingers, and she gave her a reassuring squeeze. Across the room, Thomas sat with his lawyer, his face unreadable but his posture tense. All eyes turned to Judge Miller as he entered and took his seat. The judge adjusted his glasses and scanned the room before clearing his throat. "This has been a deeply emotional and complex case. It is never easy to make decisions in custody matters, as the stakes are incredibly high and the well-being of a child must always come first." Emma's heart pounded in her chest as the judge continued. She stole a glance at Lily, who sat silently, her stuffed animal clutched tightly in her lap. Rachel, sitting beside her, leaned in slightly and whispered, "Whatever happens, we've done everything we could." Judge Miller looked down at the papers in front of him before addressing the court. Based on the evidence provided, including testimony from the involved parties, the reports from the social worker, and, most importantly, Lily's own statements, it is clear that this court must prioritize the emotional and physical well-being of the child. Emma held her breath, her grip tightening on Lily's hand. She could feel every second stretch out as she waited for the judge's next words. "I hereby award full custody of Lily Brown to her mother, Mrs. Emma Carter," the judge announced, his voice steady and firm. "Furthermore, visitation rights for Mr. Thomas Brown will be limited to supervised visits until such a time as he can demonstrate a consistent ability to provide a safe and emotionally supportive environment for his daughter." For a moment, the room was silent as the weight of the decision settled over everyone. Then, a soft, audible sigh of relief escaped Emma's lips. She turned to Lily, who looked up at her with wide eyes, her expression a mixture of confusion and hope. "Does that mean I can stay with you?" Lily asked quietly. Emma smiled, her eyes brimming with tears. "Yes, sweetheart. You're staying with me." Across the room, Thomas stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "This is unfair," he said, his voice rising. "I love my daughter. She's my family, too." Judge Miller raised his hand, his tone firm but calm. "Mr. Brown, I understand this is a difficult outcome for you. However, this decision is based solely on the evidence presented and what is in Lily's best interest. I encourage you to use this time to rebuild trust and demonstrate that you can provide the supportive environment she needs." Thomas clenched his jaw but said nothing further. His lawyer placed a hand on his shoulder, urging him to sit down. The room remained tense as the judge struck his gavel, signaling the end of the proceedings. As the courtroom began to clear, Emma knelt down beside Lily, brushing a tear from her daughter's cheek. "We did it, baby," she said softly. "You're safe now." Lily threw her arms around her mother's neck, holding her tightly. "I'm so glad," she whispered. "I was so scared, Mom." Emma kissed the top of her head, her own tears falling freely now. "You're so brave, Lily. I'm so proud of you." Rachel stood nearby, quietly packing up her papers. She glanced over at Emma and gave her a small nod. "You fought hard for her," she said. "And you won." Emma stood, still holding Lily close, and turned to Rachel. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said sincerely. "You did what any good mother would do," Rachel replied. "You put your child first." As they left the courtroom, the tension that had been weighing on Emma for so long began to lift. She knew there would still be challenges ahead, supervised visits with Thomas and helping Lily heal from the emotional scars of the past, but for the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of hope. That night, as they sat together on the couch at home, Lily snuggled into her mother's side, clutching her stuffed animal. "Are we really okay now, Mom?" she asked, her voice small but filled with cautious optimism. Emma wrapped her arm around her daughter, holding her close. "We're more than okay," she said. "We're safe. And we're going to be just fine." For the first time in months, Emma felt the heavy cloud of uncertainty lift. She knew the road ahead would be long, but with Lily by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next. Together, they would rebuild their lives, stronger and happier than before. In the days following the court's decision, Emma and Lily began to adjust to their new reality. The tension that had hung over their lives like a storm cloud had started to lift, replaced by a cautious sense of peace. For the first time in months, Emma could breathe freely, knowing that Lily was safe and the uncertainty about her custody was finally behind them. Despite the relief, Emma knew the journey wasn't over. Lily still had to navigate the emotional weight of her experiences with her father. Though supervised visitation was now in place, the memories of the past couldn't be erased overnight. Emma was determined to provide Lily with the love and stability she needed to heal. One afternoon, as sunlight streamed through the windows of their small but cozy living room, Emma sat with Lily on the couch, flipping through an old photo album. Lily had asked to look at pictures from when she was younger, something she hadn't wanted to do in a long time. "Here you are on your first day of preschool," Emma said, pointing to a photo of Lily wearing a tiny pink backpack and grinning at the camera. Lily smiled faintly. "I remember that. You packed me peanut butter crackers in my lunch." Emma chuckled. "You wouldn't eat anything else for weeks. I was starting to think you'd turn into a peanut butter cracker." Lily giggled softly, her laughter like music to Emma's ears. It was the first time in a while that she'd seen her daughter so relaxed. The lightness of the moment gave her hope that they were moving in the right direction. Later that evening, Emma tucked Lily into bed, smoothing her hair as she kissed her forehead. "Good night, sweetheart," she whispered. "Good night, Mom," Lily replied, clutching her stuffed animal tightly. As Emma turned off the light and closed the door, she paused in the hallway, her hand resting on the doorknob. She felt a wave of gratitude for the peace that had finally settled in their home. But Emma also knew that she needed to prepare for the supervised visits with Thomas. While she trusted the court's decision to implement safeguards, the idea of Lily seeing her father again brought back a swirl of emotions. She didn't want Lily to feel pressured or fearful, and she resolved to make the process as smooth as possible. The first supervised visit took place at a neutral facility designed to make children feel comfortable. The room was brightly lit and filled with toys, books, and art supplies. Emma and Lily arrived a few minutes early, and a friendly counselor greeted them warmly. "Lily, you can stay with your mom until you feel ready," the counselor said, crouching to Lily's level. "There's no rush." Lily nodded, staying close to Emma's side. After a few minutes, Thomas arrived, escorted by another counselor. He looked uneasy, his usual confidence subdued. Emma noticed the way his eyes softened when he saw Lily, though he didn't approach her immediately. "Hi, Lily," Thomas said, his voice quieter than usual. "I brought you something." He held out a small wrapped box. Lily hesitated, looking up at Emma for reassurance. Emma gave her a gentle nod, and Lily slowly stepped forward to take the box. She unwrapped it to reveal a small sketchbook and a set of colored pencils. "You told me once you liked to draw," Thomas said, his voice tinged with regret. "I thought maybe you could use these." Lily looked at the sketchbook, then back at her father. "Thank you," she said softly, before retreating back to Emma's side. The visit was brief and carefully monitored, with the counselors ensuring that Thomas maintained appropriate boundaries. When it was over, Lily seemed relieved to leave, but she also looked less fearful than Emma had expected. On the way home, Lily spoke quietly from the back seat. "He didn't yell today," she said, almost to herself. Emma glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "That's good," she said gently. "You deserve to feel safe, no matter where you are." As the weeks went on, the supervised visits continued. Thomas was making an effort to control his temper, and while Lily remained cautious, Emma could see small signs that she was beginning to feel more at ease. It would take time for her to fully trust him again, if that was even possible, but Emma was determined to let Lily move at her own pace. Meanwhile, Emma worked to strengthen the foundation of their home life. She signed Lily up for an art class, where she could channel her emotions into creativity, and arranged regular playdates with her friends from school. Slowly but surely, the laughter and lightness that had been missing from their lives began to return. One evening, as they sat together at the kitchen table working on an art project, Lily looked up at her mother and said, "I think things are getting better." Emma smiled, her heart swelling with pride and relief. "I think so too, sweetheart," she said. "And no matter what, we're in this together." As Lily returned to her drawing, Emma felt a renewed sense of hope. The road ahead would not be without challenges, but she knew they were strong enough to face whatever came their way. Together, they were building a life filled with love, resilience, and the promise of a brighter future. As the weeks turned into months, the rhythm of Emma and Lily's new life began to settle. Lily was adjusting well, her laughter returning more often, and the anxiety that had once shadowed her seemed to slowly fade. The once tense household was now filled with moments of calm and joy, something Emma hadn't experienced in years. Still, the ongoing supervised visits with Thomas remained a delicate topic. Emma was careful to tread lightly, allowing Lily to process her feelings in her own time. The visits were held weekly at the same neutral facility, where counselors facilitated the interactions and ensured Lily's comfort. While Thomas remained on his best behavior, the emotional distance between him and Lily was palpable. She would respond to his questions politely but rarely volunteered much about herself. Emma noticed these subtle interactions, but she let them play out without interference, knowing Lily needed time to find her own footing. One day, after a particularly quiet visit, Lily sat in the car on the way home, staring out the window. Emma glanced at her daughter, sensing something on her mind. "Everything okay, sweetheart?" Emma asked gently, breaking the silence. Lily hesitated before speaking. "He asked if I wanted to come live with him again," she said softly. "But I told him no." Emma felt her chest tighten but remained calm. "How did that make you feel?" she asked. Lily shrugged, fiddling with the edge of her jacket. "I don't think he gets it, Mom. I don't feel safe there. Even when he's trying to be nice, it doesn't feel right." Emma reached over and placed a hand on Lily's knee. "It's okay to feel that way, Lily. You're allowed to say what you're feeling. And remember, you don't have to do anything you're not comfortable with. That's why the visits are supervised, for your safety." Lily nodded, a small sigh escaping her lips. "I just wish it didn't have to be so hard." Emma's heart ached for her daughter. "I know, baby," she said softly. "But you're so brave, and I'm so proud of you for speaking up about what you need. That's not easy to do, but it's so important." Later that evening, Emma watched as Lily sat at the kitchen table, sketching quietly in the notebook Thomas had given her during one of their earlier visits. Emma hesitated before sitting down across from her, unsure if Lily would want to talk more. "Can I see what you're drawing?" Emma asked. Lily smiled faintly and turned the notebook around. It was a simple drawing of a tree with a bright blue sky in the background. But at the base of the tree was a small figure holding hands with another, clearly a representation of herself and Emma. "I like it," Emma said, her voice warm. "It's beautiful, just like you." Lily blushed slightly, her smile growing wider. "I thought about adding Dad, but I didn't know how to draw him," she admitted. Emma nodded, understanding the unspoken meaning behind her words. "It's okay, Lily. You don't have to figure everything out right now. Just take your time." The next day, Emma received a call from the counselor who facilitated the visits with Thomas. "Mrs. Carter," the counselor began, her tone professional but kind, "I wanted to share something I observed during today's session." Lily seemed more open to engaging, which is a good sign. But when Thomas asked her directly about living with him, she became visibly uncomfortable. Emma's grip on the phone tightened slightly. "Yes, she mentioned it to me," Emma said. She told him no, but she's still struggling to process everything. The counselor paused. "That's completely normal. Lily is finding her voice, and it's important for her to feel empowered to make her own decisions. However, I've also noticed that Thomas seems frustrated by her hesitation. It might be worth considering a conversation with him about managing expectations." Emma exhaled deeply, her protective instincts kicking in. "Thank you for letting me know. I'll think about the best way to handle this." That evening, Emma sat alone after Lily had gone to bed, reflecting on the counselor's words. She knew that Thomas's frustration stemmed from his inability to control the situation, a pattern she was all too familiar with from their marriage. But she also recognized that Lily needed space to navigate her feelings without added pressure. The next time Emma and Thomas saw each other during a visit handoff, Emma decided to address the issue directly. As Lily played nearby under the counselor's supervision, Emma approached Thomas. "Thomas," she began, keeping her voice calm but firm, "I know you're trying to rebuild your relationship with Lily, and I appreciate that. But I need you to understand that pushing her for answers she's not ready to give isn't helping." Thomas looked at her, his brow furrowing. "I'm just trying to show her I care," he said defensively. "I know you care," Emma said. "But Lily needs time. She's still processing everything, and pressuring her to say or feel something she's not ready for will only push her further away. If you want to rebuild trust with her, you need to let her set the pace." Thomas seemed to consider her words, his expression softening slightly. "I just want her to know I'm here for her," he said quietly. "She knows," Emma said. "But she needs to feel it in her own way. Give her space, Thomas. That's how you'll show her you care." For the first time in years, Emma saw a flicker of understanding in his eyes. He nodded, and though no further words were exchanged, Emma felt a small sense of hope that perhaps, over time, things could improve, not just for Lily, but for all of them. Over the next few months, the changes in Lily's demeanor were undeniable. The quiet, withdrawn little girl who had once clung tightly to her mother's side was slowly becoming more confident, more expressive, and more at ease. Emma watched her daughter with pride and relief, grateful for the steps forward they were taking together. Lily's supervised visits with Thomas continued, and though the process was far from perfect, progress was being made. Thomas seemed to have taken Emma's words to heart. He no longer pushed Lily for answers or tried to force a bond that she wasn't ready to embrace. Instead, he focused on being present in the moments they shared, whether it was playing board games in the supervised facility or simply asking about her favorite books and hobbies. For the first time, Thomas appeared to be learning how to meet Lily where she was, rather than expecting her to conform to his expectations. One day, after a particularly calm and uneventful visit, Lily surprised Emma as they drove home. "Mom," she said, her voice thoughtful, "I think Dad's trying." Emma glanced at her daughter in the rearview mirror, her heart skipping a beat. "What makes you say that?" she asked. Lily hugged her stuffed animal tightly, staring out the window. "He's not yelling anymore. And he's asking me about things I like my drawings and my friends. It's different. Better, I think." Emma's throat tightened, a mix of emotions swirling inside her. "That's a good thing, sweetheart," she said gently. "It means he's learning how to show you he cares in the right way." Lily nodded, her gaze still fixed on the passing trees. "Yeah. But I still don't want to live with him. I like it better with you." Emma smiled, her heart warming at Lily's honesty. "You don't have to live with him, Lily. That decision is yours, and I'll always support whatever makes you feel safe and happy." As they pulled into their driveway, Emma felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. Their home had become a sanctuary again, a place where Lily could laugh, grow, and be herself without fear or tension. That evening, after dinner, Lily asked if they could work on an art project together. Emma happily agreed, pulling out the colored pencils and sketchbooks. As they sat at the table, Lily began drawing a picture of their family. She sketched herself and Emma holding hands under a bright sun, with their little house in the background. Then, after a moment's hesitation, she added another figure, Thomas, standing a little farther away, but still smiling. "Do you think this is okay?" Lily asked, showing Emma the drawing. Emma studied the picture, her heart swelling with pride at her daughter's courage and compassion. "It's perfect," she said, pulling Lily into a hug. "You've got a big heart, Lily. I'm so proud of you." The weeks turned into months, and their new normal continued to take shape. Lily thrived in her art class, making friends and creating pieces that filled their home with color and joy. Emma began to focus on her own growth, too, taking up yoga and reconnecting with friends she hadn't seen during the stress of the custody battle. Together, they were building a life filled with love and resilience. One evening, as they sat on the couch watching a movie, Lily turned to Emma and rested her head on her mother's shoulder. "Mom," she said softly, "thank you for fighting for me. I'm really happy now." Emma wrapped her arm around her daughter, kissing the top of her head. "I'd do it all over again, 1,000,000 times," she said. "You're my everything, Lily." In that moment, Emma realized how far they had come, not just in their legal battle, but in healing and rediscovering what it meant to be a family. Though the road had been long and filled with challenges, they had emerged stronger, closer, and more hopeful than ever. Whatever the future held, Emma knew they would face it together, with the unshakable bond they had built through love and perseverance. And for the first time in a long time, she felt truly at peace. The ending of this story is a poignant reminder of the resilience of children and the lengths a parent will go to protect their child. It showcases the power of courage, not just Lily's courage to speak up about her feelings, but also Emma's relentless fight to ensure her daughter's safety and happiness. This isn't just a story about winning a custody battle, it's a story about rebuilding trust, healing wounds, and creating a nurturing environment where love and stability can thrive. What makes this ending particularly satisfying is its realistic yet hopeful tone. It doesn't paint a perfect resolution, there are still challenges ahead, particularly in managing Lily's relationship with her father, but it emphasizes progress and growth. Thomas's supervised visits provide an opportunity for him to reflect on his behavior and work toward being a better parent, while Lily and Emma begin to reclaim a sense of normalcy and joy in their daily lives. This story also highlights the importance of listening to children. Lily's voice, often dismissed in such situations, became the pivotal factor in the judge's decision. It's a powerful testament to the idea that children, even when young, deserve to have their feelings and fears taken seriously. Ultimately, the story ends on a hopeful note, with Lily and Emma finding peace and strength in their bond. It's a reminder that even in the face of adversity, love and perseverance can create a path toward healing and a brighter future. It leaves readers with the comforting knowledge that, while life may not be perfect, the steps taken to protect and support a child can make all the difference.